Okay. Um, just to share. Hmm? Am I sharing?
I think
Okay. Do you want to continue without audio? Continue. Okay, then that should go back over in a minute. Here we are. Okay, all right, here we go. So I want to talk a little bit about I really want to focus on one concept in the book of Revelation today. And it's a concept that I think is really practical, because when I look as a teacher, when I look at a book like Revelation, I think, well, there's a whole lot of things we could talk about that at the end of the day would wind up not being that helpful. Right. I mean, it might be interesting, but I don't know that it would actually be that helpful as we go forth from this place. So what I want to do today is talk about a concept that is in Revelation. We don't really have it in any other books. And it is the picture that is given in this apocalyptic visionary book about the fall of Satan from heaven, right? The throwdown of Satan from heaven, and what that means, what that actually means. And so where I'm going with this, after I talk just a little bit about the book itself, I want to focus in on this passage in Revelation 12 that gives us a picture, again, a visionary picture of Satan's fall from heaven and what that defeat means for us. And I'll tell you right up front where I'm going, right? One of the things that's mentioned when in the scripture, when it talks about, what Satan is, his what he's doing, is that he's producing a lot of pain for people. And one of the things that we find when we look at pictures in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, right? If we could just kind of boil it all down, to what's ahead of us, right? Is, and Isaiah talks about this, Revelation talks about this, is a new heaven and a new earth, right? And we'll get into that more next week, kind of as the finale. But one of the characteristics of the new earth, again, it's in both testaments, is the presence of peace and the absence of pain, right? When we think about the imagery that's given about what's coming for us, this new existence, right? It's talked about in terms of peaceful coexistence. You might think of the Isaiah passage, the lion will lay down with the lamb, right? These opposites, right, that come to that live in peace, and in Revelation, the absence of pain, right? There will be no more pain. There will be no tears, right? We have lots of songs about that. When you sing of heaven, right, you think, tears, there's no more pain, there's no more suffering, all of that, right? Death has been swallowed up in victory, right? So there's no. Now, the reason I think this is important is because as the community of God, the church on earth, we are agents of God's grace and mercy, which look forward to what we will be like in the future, right? We should be peace-producing people, right? If that's where we're headed, right? Then the shalom of God, the peace of God, right, is what God has for us in the future, right? As the people of God, we know that, right? And so this idea of of coming together in unity, right, is something that holds us to peace. Now, of course, now it's not perfect, right? It's still fraught, right? But what's coming is the peace. And in that peace is the absence of pain. And so what I wanted to do is kind of show you where this is in the book. And then I want to talk about how it is. I want to talk about the anatomy of pain, right? What pain is and what it consists of. And then how we as the people of God can help others who are in pain, right? What does it mean to do that, right? I think this will be helpful, right? But it comes, you can see it, right, in the book of Revelation. And then I want to give us time to talk about it. So I'm going to go through this preliminary part pretty quickly. And the title of this is The Defeat of the Enemy, right? The defeat of Satan, which is what Revelation really ultimately aims to tell us, is that the Satan, his angels, all of the things that cause pain and suffering in the earth are destined for, eventual punishment in the end, and throwing into the lake of fire and all of that kind of thing. But we can help as the people of God to minimize pain in the present, right? So we'll talk about that. Very quickly, the book of Revelation is, and I think this is just helpful to know, it is a revelation singular, right? A lot of times people talk about the book of Revelations. It's not. It's a single vision, right? And it basically tells you right here at the beginning, right? So it's a revelation of Jesus that God gave to him to show his servant. So God's giving a picture to Jesus to give to us, or give to his servant, what must soon take place, and made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, right, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw, right? So God had a vision. He's sending it to Jesus. It comes through an angel to John, and John is now writing this vision down for us, right? And there's a blessing that comes, and I think this is interesting. Blessed is the one who reads the words of the prophecy. Blessed are those who hear and keep what is written in it, for the time is near, right? So there's a blessing that comes to us from interacting with this book, right? And I noticed the word read here, keep, right? So there's an intention for what's in this book to be important to us, right? This, and I won't go through all of this, but I think it is interesting that Revelation, as a piece of writing, right, is very consistent with a type of writing that was prevalent from the 2nd century, probably before Christ, in Jewish, as well as Greek thought, but Jewish also, all the way up until maybe the 3rd, 5th century. There was a type of writing called the cosmic journey, right? And there's lots and lots of writings. And what would be imagined in these cosmic journeys, largely based on biblical characters, was a vision of what heaven looked like, right? And we've talked a little bit about this, the layers of heaven, everything that happened as one ascended to the throne where God was. These visions would imagine what punishment was like, what hell was like. We do have a hell by now. Would have a picture of who's in it and who's in heaven, and it would have pictures of angels. In these cosmic tours is where we get a lot of kind of, I don't want to call it history, but it's more like the lore about how the saints died, like the view of Isaiah dying by being sawed in two, for example. comes from this kind of writing, right? What happens with the Archangel Michael, right? There's a lot of things that are built up around him. Now, some Christian traditions, like Catholicism and certain parts of Orthodox Christianity, have kind of taken this and run with it, right? And sort of turned it into fact. It's really not. It's part of this visionary world. Revelation is that type of literature. And I think because of that, when the canon of scripture that we have started to come together, right? It didn't happen overnight. It took, what, 300 years, 400 years to come together. Revelation was probably one of the most contested books, right? Should it be in here or should it not? Along with 2 Peter and Jude. So you finally had consensus that yes, Revelation should be in. There were some other books that were like it that didn't make it, right? First Clement and the Shepherd of Hermes and others. But anyway, point is, Revelation makes it into the canon, and it makes it in by virtue of the fact that it coheres with things that are with images that we find in the Old Testament, right? Such as new heaven and the new earth, this idea of peace, this idea of belonging, this idea of the defeat of Satan and all that causes pain and suffering. It talks a lot about Babylon, right? Which we know from even the writings of Peter, that in that day, when you couldn't openly criticize Rome, right? But you could talk about it in code, right? So if people wanted to criticize the Roman Empire, or they wanted to criticize the Caesars, or they wanted to criticize politics of the day under empire, you could talk about Babylon, right? So when you read Babylon in this context, you're pretty sure we're talking about critique of Rome. That's only important because probably early readers or recipients of Revelation would have been concerned about oppression under the Roman Empire, persecution of different types. That's conjecture. We don't really know. But it makes sense that could have been something that was in people's minds when they were reading Revelation, right? So one of the ways to think about Revelation that makes it less scary and a little more helpful. And again, I don't want to be quoted as saying that I think this is fiction, right? So don't go there with me. What I'm trying to find a way to describe it that makes it more contemporary is, how many Lord of the Rings fans do we have in here? Right. Okay. You know, when you watch the whole Lord of the Rings series, you get this big sweeping world of good versus evil, right? That's how Revelation functions, right? You're supposed to sit, they didn't have movies back then, right? But you're supposed to sit back and just take the whole vision in, right? It's really not meant to be analyzed the way we do it today, right? That's not the kind of genre that it was.
And Tolkien had Revelation.
Yes. Yeah, Tolkien had that idea in his head. And so that's why I don't want to get too caught up in, the seven bowls and the seven trumpets and all of that, because it's imagery, right? That you see. It's this cosmic contest between good and evil. All right. So with that in mind, let's get to the point. A war broke out in heaven. Michael fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back. Okay, just listen to this, right? Don't try to analyze it. But they were defeated. There was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who's called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. A lot of throwdown. Then I heard the loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser, right, that's the Satan, right, from Hebrew, our brothers and sisters has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. But they have conquered him, right, conquering, we've talked about that, by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, for they did not cling to life, even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and all those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil, Satan, all of that, has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short, right? So this is this picture of opposition, right, that we face on earth. Peter says the same thing, right, when he talks about the devil acts as a roaring lion, seeking to whom he may devour. You might remember that from First Peter. Same idea. Jesus himself talks about this this concept here when he says towards the end of his discourse with his disciples, do you believe the hour is coming? Indeed, it has come when you will be scattered, each one to his home, and you will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. I have said this to you so that in me you may have what? Peace, right? In the world you face persecution, right? Connect this to the idea of this prowling around Satan, right? That's opposing us. You will have persecution, but take courage. I have conquered the world. So this opposition that comes against us, while it's bad, we don't have to fear it, because Jesus has already conquered it, right? Makes sense? He's gone first. He's conquered it. This word persecution, it's translated differently, but the basic idea in Greek is that it's the pressure that you feel, or the friction that you feel when two things rub together, right? Right. It's that it's what starts a fire, actually, if you're a Boy Scout, right? But you rub things together like this, it gets hot, right? That's this persecution, right? It's us rubbing up against this pressure. Rubs you the wrong way. Yes, right? That's the idea, right? And Jesus is saying, don't be afraid of this, right? Take courage, right? Because I've already overcome this. It's going to play out. You're going to win in the end. Again, First Peter talks about it. Cast your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. Satan, like a roaring lion, your adversary, prowls around, right, seeking someone to devour. So let Jesus help you with that. Trust him with this. Now, the last part of this theme is when the revelation ends. I see a new heaven and a new earth, for the first earth and the first heaven has passed away. The sea was no more, and I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now this is what's important, right? See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. Okay, here it is. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. Right? This is what's coming, right? And here's where the idea of this rubbing together, the anxiety that's caused, the pain that's caused, it will pass away, right? Now, what's interesting about this to me is, of all of the things that could have described being with God forever and ever and ever, right? Of all the things you could use to describe what that's like, right? What's actually the characteristic of it that's mentioned in this vision is the wiping away of tears. No more mourning, no more crying, no more pain, right? Pain is something that all of us deal with, right? And I think it's the characteristics of pain are, and I'll take you through what some of them are. If we kind of tap into that, I think we can kind of see that this is where, and I'll just use this language, this is where the enemy and the forces of darkness, however you want to describe that, this is where we become vulnerable to that, right? It's in these moments of pain, right? Elaine Scarry is a scholar who has done extensive work on the anatomy of pain. If you're interested in this, she has a book that she wrote. It's not new. It came out in 1985. It's called The Body in Pain. I have never seen, I'm sure there are other things like it. This is not a psychology book, but it's a book written about the characteristics of the body in pain. And pain here is not just physical, right? But it's psychic pain, right? It's emotional pain. It's pain all the way from the smallest thing that can irritate us, right? To something as intentional as torture, right? I mean, it's the full gamut of pain, right? But some of the things that she notes in here about pain are that pain is overwhelmingly present, right? So here's how you touch base with this. You know, when you have a toothache, that's all you feel, right? I mean, it takes your whole body over. Or when you have a paper cut, that's what does it for me. And it's a silly little thing, right? But I mean, it's like, how do I get this pain to go away, right? It's a small thing, but it's overwhelmingly present, takes you over. Right? The other thing she noticed, and this is, I think, something that connects with me, spiritual, is that pain is a kind of negation, right? That when you're in pain, it's like something is coming against you, right? And particularly, you know how it is when you're worried about something and you can't quit worrying about it? How that worry is like something's coming at you like this. It's against you. You want it to go away, right? It's a negative kind of thing. The other thing that she notes is this is a dissolution of boundaries between the outside and the inside. One of the biggest protections we have as human beings is our skin, right? It's the boundary between the inside and the outside, right? We also have what's called personal space. You know, how doesn't somebody gets too close? Like, you know, but it's a danger thing. I mean, it's like, you know, but that's not just physical, it's also psychological, right? When something, you know, gets too close and you just want to push it away, right? It's an invasion. Something's invading you. It also is a split between one's reality and that of others, right? So when you think about you're going through something, it can be physical, it can be psychological, mental, right? And you're not okay, right? You're not okay. And other people notice you're not okay, but they don't know why you're not okay, right? But guess what? You can't explain it to them, can you? Remember that? You know, when I don't know how to tell you how I feel, right? You know, that separation, right? That's a characteristic of pain, right? It's a split. You're living in a different reality than people over here. You've just been through this horrible thing or going through this horrible thing, and you feel distant from everyone else. Pain monopolizes your language, right? That's when you don't even know how to talk about what you're feeling. Been there? I've been there all the time. I don't know how to talk about it. I don't have words, or the pain is so overwhelming you can't talk, right? I think this is where Jewish traditions of sitting Shiva with people when they die, right? It's an intentional silence. There's nothing to say, right? I mean, I think they get this. But the idea here that I think spiritually that's important is when a person is in a lot of pain, sometimes the only sound they can make is a crying out, right? And this is the one thing that's true all the way through Scripture, is that God attends to the cry of his people, right? You think about Hagar, right, in Genesis, the people of the crying out in the Sodom and Gomorrah story, the crying out of the Egyptians, Israelites in Egypt, right? In the New Testament, the Holy Spirit in Romans that intercedes with sighs too deep for words, right? It's right when we don't have language as a result of pain, God attends to that. And so one of the things that we are that we are, I think, tasked with as the people of God is, how are we agents of God's mercy and grace and peace when other people are in pain, right? How do we meet people in pain, right? Shakespeare said this, and this is from Macbeth: "Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak knits up the o'erwrought heart and bids it to break." Right? Helping and people to find language to talk about their pain helps the pain to go away, right? One of the verbal expressions, because pain isolates, this is why it's so important. And I think from everything I've seen, our church does a great job of this, is that we don't let people, we find ways to integrate people so they're not isolated, right? Isolation is where pain festers, right? And so to find ways for people to tell their stories, right, is a way of encouraging people to give language to the story. And it may take a long, long time, right? There's another really wonderful book. I didn't put it in the notes, I meant to. But it's a book called The Wounded Storyteller by Arthur Frank, who's a sociologist. And he writes about the importance of giving people space to talk about what they've been through as a way of working through pain. That narrative and storytelling are key, right, to helping people overcome struggle, right? And so when we make space as friends, as community groups, we are actually, and we give people a chance to talk, right? And we give them lots of space to talk, right? And we're willing to be good listeners and just listen to their story, right? We're actually helping a person find language to get through and verbalize what they're dealing with, right? Because that's the thing about community that's so important. This is the thing. This is my thesis, right, for the morning. This is where Satan wants to cause the trouble, is to break up that community, right? Remember, Satan was thrown out. The part of the virulence of evil is that evil itself is isolated, right? Evil, it wants to reproduce itself through being alone, being isolated, right? So evil's going to work against the building of this community that will help people get through stuff, right? Which is why it's so important to be an inclusive congregation, right? And I'm not going to go into that, but to be a place that is welcoming for everybody to be able to talk about who they are, right? Without shame, without guilt, right? And so the sort of the question that I have based on this is, what are some of the ways in which you have found are really helpful in helping other people deal with their pain, right? Right. I've talked about a couple, but there's many more. Or we'll flip it around. If you've been in a lot of pain or are in a lot of pain, what are things that help you stay connected, help you stay integrated? Yeah, were you gonna say?
Looks like you didn't finish your statement.
Well, all I was going to say is that I think this idea of giving pain to giving pain language is one of the most significant ways we can combat the forces of evil in the world. If there was one thing we can do, right, is to recognize that this is one of the ways that the forces of darkness try to keep people in pain, right, is to keep them from community and to keep them silent. Right. So I'll stop, right? That was.
I was gonna say, I think about the times that we're kind of commanded to be compassionate. That seems like an
Yes.
to pain and
Mhm.
just to try to feel
Mhm.
what people are going through.
True. Mhm. That's right at the core of it. Exactly. Yeah, Annie.
John.
Oh, yeah, John. Mhm.
On top of what Julie just said, we have to give them permission to share their pain, so we have to ask. We have to open the door, and sometimes it's not really pleasant to be standing at the door when someone else is pouring out their pain,
Mhm.
but that's what we're supposed to do. And maybe we can learn from them when we're in pain ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I think Rosemary was.
I could talk about this a long time because pain
Yeah.
is kind of my jam and the PT. So I think one thing I want to do is to separate a concept of pain and suffering because they're quite different. And I think what we're talking about here is suffering. Because we can feel pain and be okay. I have felt a lot of pain personally, physically, and been okay. I actually am less okay with emotion. But in a way, it's the same thing. As a PT, for instance, I need to give people language to describe their physical pain.
Yes.
But also language to describe how that's affecting their life. So, and that's Debbie's gig. So I think the integration, so we talk about inclusiveness, including both things, because pain is a perception. It is anatomical, it is neurophysiological.
Mhm.
So to understand the differences and the subtleties between pain and suffering and how do you attend to people's suffering.
Mhm. That's good. Thank you.
It's being silent, giving language is really important and allowing somebody. And one other thing is just sometimes when you don't have the language, which you often don't, or maybe mostly don't, is to say, I'm here. I see you, I'm here. Just letting a person know that allows them to find their language. I have found that if I've ever given that to someone, which I just happened to yesterday, but also when it's been, that's what gets me toward working on the other side the best.
Good. Yeah, and that is important to differentiate between pain and suffering, even though they're related, right?
Absolutely.
But they are two different things. And I'm gonna get to, yeah, Rosemary. You had,
John and I have been mindful of a friend who now for close to 3 years has been suffering pain and isolation. And we've tried to reach out in all aspects of life. And now the door is closed by this person. And I don't know how to go about opening a door if a person's suffering and was part of our little community and is now chosen not to be in the
not to be.
community.
Mhm.
That's making me suffer.
Suffering.
You
Mhm.
know, I don't know what to do to help this person now.
Mhm.
So answer that.
Well-
Are you willing to be there if he comes back?
That's what I'm doing now, you know, but I'm kind of allowing this person to not
Yeah.
communicate,
Mhm.
understanding. And Debbie, just this morning, I shared this story with Debbie, and Debbie said, perhaps this person that's been suffering for so long is tired of talking about the suffering.
Yeah.
This person has had the language and has had that door open to us. We felt intimately. And so Debbie helped me by saying maybe she's tired of talking about that now.
Mhm. Needs a rest. Now, let's see, I was gonna try. Yes, Elaine.
Jesus has said, all you who are weary and heavy laden, come to me and I will give you rest. For
Mhm.
my yoke is easy and my burden.
Mhm. That's a great
That's always
scripture.
helped
Helped
me.
me, yeah. Yeah, that's part of what he said. That's also in the Gospel of John, right? I mean, come to me. Jesus can handle it. Yeah, John, thank you.
Charles, I want to thank you for this lesson. We are all living in this time where we're so separated from each other and so worried about that and so hurt by that. But what you're revealing is the community is the antidote to that,
Mhm.
and that evil or Satan
Mhm.
is the reason for that separation. There's a motivation to divide us
Mhm.
as opposed to keeping us together as a community. And it's another reason why we exist as a church family. So
Mhm.
it's really a profound lesson, and I just thank you
Mhm.
for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. I wanted, yeah, David and then Aaron.
Just, just maybe a different perspective, I
Sure.
think dealing and managing pain and helping others work through pain is also a cultural difference in how different communities maybe approach the treatment of pain. You know, there is one perspective of helping others with pain, which is more of a perhaps therapeutic, empathetic approach.
Mhm.
And then, maybe from experiences that I've had, either through the careers and training that I've had, or maybe cultural,
Mhm.
where the idea of empathy and therapeutic doesn't really exist. It's more the other perspective of it could be so much worse. I know for some people that probably is not helpful, but I think for some
people,
that idea of, suck it up, buttercup, is helpful. Again, no treatment is, applicable for everyone. So there's different perspectives. I just wanted to provide
no, I think that's
that other
good.
perspective.
Yeah, the shift in perspective, right, is also part of dealing with this. Yeah.
Because I've had, over the course of my years, people telling me, if I was in pain, they would say, are you in pain or are you injured? If you're in pain, I don't care. If you're injured, go see the medic, go see whatever, would be paid, just.
Mhm.
I need to talk to those people.
So, so to this point, I know, I want to give Aaron a chance, but just since you talked about it, a little, it wasn't funny at the time. It was actually really true and helpful later on. The very first time I went to Africa to teach, my daughter Abby went with me, and she was still in college. And at that time, neither one of us had ever done any kind of teaching or mission related kinds of things. And so one day she'd met somebody in one of her the classes there. Went there to teach. She was in the class, and it was at night, and it was not well lit. And she came and she was running. She hit a pothole. And she didn't crack her little toe, but it put it out of joint. She was in pain. So at the same time, there was a nurse who was there on another project. We went over to see her. She was in the building next door. What do we do? Right. And she looked at us, and the first thing she said was, well, it's Africa. You're just gonna have to get over it. Which I thought was unbelievably not compassionate, but it was also helpful, right? Is that if you're gonna do this kind of work, you need to get used to stuff that's gonna happen. I mean, the world has not ended. She took a popsicle stick, popped the thing back in place, put a bandage around it, and that was it. But to your point about respect. Okay, one more thing, and then I know her.
Yes, out of the myriad of points I would love to make, I'm gonna boil it down to two. All I can think of when we're talking about this is The Princess Bride, where Wesley says, where the Buttercup complains about being in pain, and Wesley says to her, "Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who says otherwise is trying to sell you something." The other part that comes to mind is that now I have lost. It was maybe I have to leave it at that.
Okay.
Think of the
No,
other.
you can tell us next week. Okay, let's, I know we're a little bit past time, so who has the? Aaron, okay.